Night settles slowly over the long curve of the Alexandrian harbor, and you stand at the edge of the city as if at the edge of a dream, listening to the soft hush of waves folding and unfolding against the stones of the quay, the distant creak of moored ships, the faint call of a late boatman drifting over the water like a sigh. The sea is not a dark emptiness but a wide, breathing surface that catches fragments of starlight and holds them in broken, shifting patterns. Occasional ripples move across it where a fish breaks the surface or where a rope trailing from a hull drags a thin line through the water. Above the dark horizon, the sky is a calm, deep blue shading into velvet indigo, scattered with stars that seem to hang low over the roofs and colonnades, as though they, too, are leaning in to listen to the sleeping city's breath. In this quiet hour, Alexandria feels less like a busy port and more like a living thought stretched along the coast, full of hidden rooms of light and learning, anchored delicately between water and sand. You draw the night air slowly into your lungs. It tastes faintly of salt and tar, the ghost of smoke from cooking fires long since doused, and the cool mineral scent of stone that has finally released the last of the day's heat. As you exhale, something in your chest unknots. The rough brightness of daylight, the crowded voices of the markets, the clatter of carts over rutted streets, all of that lies behind you now, receding like a tide. Here at the harbor's edge, the sounds are fewer and more rounded, the soft thud of wood against wood as ships shift on their moorings, the faint echoed clack of a loose ring striking a mast, the distant, sleepy call of a watchman that barely distinguishes itself from the murmur of the waves. For a while, you simply stand and let the rhythm of the sea align with your own breathing, your awareness narrowing to the gentle repetition of water on stone, in and out, in and out. When at last you turn away, you do so without hurry. The harbor retreats behind you, not with finality, but like a page half-read that you know you could return to at any time. You begin to walk uphill along a stone-paved street that climbs from the waterfront into the city. Your sandals meet the worn slabs with a soft, hollow sound, each step ringing briefly before dissolving into the layered quiet. The stones themselves are smooth underfoot, rounded by countless journeys taken before yours, and cooled by the evening breeze to a pleasant, steady temperature. Their subtle irregularities, the slightest tilt here, a shallow depression there, register through the soles of your feet as a gentle, almost comforting texture. The buildings on either side rise in pale plains of plaster and stone, their facades broken by doorways and narrow windows. Many of the doors are closed now, wooden panels fitted snugly into their frames, bars set in place for the night. Yet from thin gaps and small apertures, a warm, muted light escapes, a strip of gold along the bottom of a door, a soft glow from a high opening where someone has not yet shuttered the world away. Through these slivers of illumination drift small sounds from interior lives. A murmur of conversation, low and unhurried. The clink of a cup set on a table. A short, relaxed laugh that appears, lingers, and then is gone. These fragments never rise to the level of intrusion, they are like hints of stories continuing quietly behind walls, parallel to your own nocturnal path. As you climb, the harbor's voice grows softer, stretched thin by distance and the gentle curve of streets. The smell of salt diminishes, giving way to other scents that live deeper in the city, the faint dryness of stored grain seeping through a warehouse wall, the herbal trace of leaves hanging to dry in some unseen courtyard, the powdery, almost sweet smell of dust cooled after heat. Here and there, the faint tang of limestone and mortar rises with the shifting wind, a reminder of the stones that cradle the city's weight. The higher you walk, the more the city seems to fall into a shared quiet. The streets widen in places, then narrow again, yet the stillness follows you. A stray dog moves across the road ahead. Its paws silent, its form melting back into a shadowed alley. A shutter closes somewhere with a soft, final sound. Above, the stars seem a little sharper now, the sky a little clearer, as though every step uphill brings you not just away from the harbor but closer to the cool, observing vastness overhead. At a certain point, without any sudden marker, you become aware that the character of the buildings around you has changed. Shops and crowded houses have given way to more spacious structures, their facades broader, their courtyards deeper, their lines more deliberate. Ahead, rising above the surrounding roofs like a sober, stone-made horizon, you glimpse the pale walls and colonnades of the Mouse Ion and the Great Library. Their forms are softened by starlight, edges losing sharpness under the gentle wash of darkness, yet their presence is unmistakable. Columns stand in repeated ranks, their shafts pale and vertical, catching the moon in thin bands of light along their rounded sides. As you draw closer, the complex ceases to be just a distant silhouette and becomes a presence, not loud or imposing, but solid, steady, and aware. It feels less like a single building and more like an intricate garden of stone, courtyards within courtyards, halls nesting inside other halls, colonnades unfolding like quiet paths under sheltering roofs. At this late hour, it is not closed off or forbidding. Instead, it gives the impression of a vast mind at rest, its thoughts not extinguished but withdrawn into deep, lamplit rooms, receptive to those who enter with a soft tread. At the main gate, 2 tall torches burn in bronze baskets mounted high on the wall. Their flames rise and bow in constant, contained motion, sending out a warm, golden light that spills across the carved lintel and the stone around it. The bronze itself catches the glow, brightening where the flame's heart is strongest, then fading into cooler tones along its edges. Thin threads of smoke rise straight upward into the still air before dissolving into the darkness. The firelight blurs the boundary between the city's outer night and the library's inner quiet, making the archway feel less like a barrier and more like a soft, glowing threshold. A guardian stands near the gate, wrapped in a simple cloak that drapes in vertical folds to his sandaled feet. A spear rests lightly against his shoulder, more symbol than threat at this hour. His face, seen in the shifting torchlight, is calm and untroubled. When his gaze meets yours, there is no suspicion, only a brief recognition that you are one more quiet figure entering a place that welcomes such stillness. A small inclination of his head is enough, nothing more is needed. His presence reassures you in a subtle way. He is there to watch and to tend the boundary, yet he does not tighten it, only honors it. You step beneath the carved stone arch. The underside of the lintel is cool and shadowed, the patterns etched there, vines, small scrolls, perhaps the suggestion of a lyre or a stylized plant, visible only in fragments as the torchlight flickers. Passing under this stone feels like passing under a lowered brow, from the open, star-filled sky into the more intimate, contained world within. As you move forward, the muffled sounds of the city outside recede even more sharply, as if a soft curtain has drawn itself across them. You emerge into the inner courtyard of the library, and the night changes character. Here, the sky opens wide again, framed by the high inner walls and the orderly lines of surrounding colonnades. The courtyard is broad but not empty, its emptiness is full of intention, a space for air and light and the slow passage of feet. The moon lies high above, casting a pale, even brightness over the flagstones, which respond by reflecting it in muted tones of gray and blue. Shadows of columns fall in regular intervals, long and slightly blurred, overlapping with each other in quiet geometry. The air feels cooler here, cleansed by the open space and the stone's nocturnal calm. In the center of the courtyard, a fig tree rises from a square of earth cut neatly into the pavement. Its trunk is sturdy, the bark gently ridged and pale in the moonlight. The branches spread outward in a loose, generous canopy, each limb dividing and subdividing, supporting broad leaves that are dark on the underside and softly luminous on top where the moon touches them. When the light breeze moves through, the leaves whisper with a dry, feathered sound, and their overlapping shapes send fluttering shadows down onto the stone. At the tree's base, a shallow stone basin is set into the ground, filled with still water. The surface mirrors the night sky, holding the moon's image in a perfect, pale disk. Here and there, a leaf drifts, turning slowly, leaving gentle ripples that distort the reflection, stretching it, breaking it, then allowing it to reassemble. When you look down at this quiet pool, you see both the sky above and the suggestion of your own lampless silhouette bending over it, the two images shifting and mingling like two thoughts passing through the same mind. Around the courtyard, colonnades form sheltered walkways leading off in different directions, deeper into the library's many wings. Under their roofs, the darkness is broken by the soft gold of lamps burning just beyond open doorways. These lamps do not flare, they glow steadily, their light pooling on threshold stones and along the lower parts of walls, leaving upper reaches dissolved into shadow. The faint scent of oil and warm wax hangs in the air, interwoven with the gentler smell of cooled stone and the faintest hint of dried papyrus drifting from unseen storerooms. Somewhere within the building's interior, you catch the nearly inaudible sound of a scroll being handled, a soft rustle, a careful, measured movement, so quiet that it might be mistaken for the turning of a dream. On a low bench near the fig tree, a small lamp has been left burning inside an alabaster bowl. The bowl itself is carved thin enough that the stone transmits the light, transforming the vessel into a milky, glowing shell. The flame at its center appears only as a softened, bright core, its individual edges are blurred into a gentle blur of gold. The wick rises from a tiny ring floating in clear oil, and the surface of the oil is barely disturbed, trembling only when a breath of air crosses it. The light from the lamp spreads outward, spilling a warm circle onto the stone bench and the nearby paving, catching the edges of the basin and the lower curve of the fig tree's trunk. You step closer and feel the faint warmth radiating from the alabaster, a warmth that seems to belong as much to the bowl itself as to the flame inside. The smell of the oil is subtle, fine sesame, clean and delicate, with a softness that hints at care and expense. The smoke it produces is nearly invisible, rising in a slender, transparent column that disappears almost immediately into the dark. Watching it, you sense a kind of pulse in the flame, a slow, almost breathing expansion and contraction as the wick feeds on the oil, creating a rhythm that invites your thoughts to settle and follow. From along the colonnade, an attendant approaches, his linen tunic a pale shape moving between the alternating bands of shadow and lamplight. The cloth hangs simply, brushed smooth by movement, and where the fabric folds, it gathers the darkness in narrow lines. His sandals whisper against the stone, the soft sound merging with the distant rustle of leaves overhead. In his hands, he carries a small wooden tray, well used but carefully kept, its surface bearing that particular sheen that comes from frequent touch. Upon the tray rests a travel lamp of fired clay, already lit. Its rounded body is shaped to fit the curve of a hand, with a small handle at one end and a short spout at the other where the wick emerges. The clay's surface shows subtle variations in color, traces of the firing, places where the flame in the kiln once licked closer, leaving warmer tones. The lid, fitted neatly into the top, is decorated with a simple rosette whose edges are softened by soot and many fingers. When the attendant reaches you, he inclines his head, and the tray tilts ever so slightly toward you, an invitation without words. The lamp's flame burns low and steady, its reflection a tiny, shifting star in the polished grain of the wood. You reach out and lift the lamp from the tray. It sits comfortably in your palm, its warmth spreading through your skin to the tendons of your hand, the clay rougher along its edges and smoother where many hands have held it before. Your fingers curl naturally around its body, learning its weight, its center of balance. The attendant steps back again, his task complete, and moves on under the colonnade, his presence already dissolving into the quiet motion of the courtyard. You are left with your own small island of light nestled in your hand, its flame now the closest brightness to your eyes. It illuminates your fingers, making the skin appear almost translucent where it is thinnest, outlining the fine bones and tendons beneath. When you shift your grip, the flame leans gently and then straightens, as if acknowledging the change but refusing to be disturbed. You begin to walk along the colonnade toward the inner halls, the lamp guiding your steps. As you move, your flame becomes one more in a scattered constellation of other lights, lamps in wall niches, lamps set on stone ledges near doorways, lamps carried by other late visitors and residents, each moving at its own unhurried pace. When seen together, these small flames form no strict pattern, yet they suggest lines and clusters, like stars in a sky that only the librarians fully know how to read. The air beneath the colonnade is cool but not cold. The stone overhead has released most of the day's heat, and now it serves as a calm canopy, sheltering you from the open sky but not pressing down. The occasional breeze moves through the open side of the colonnade, brushing your face, stirring the edges of your clothing, and momentarily making the flames of the lamps lean in unison in one direction before they straighten again. Shadows walk with you, shifting as your lamp swings slightly with each step, pooling between the columns and then thinning out again. From deeper within the building, the unobtrusive sounds of nocturnal scholarship reach you. A gentle clink of ceramic as a cup is set down. The soft exhale of someone clearing their throat. The hush of fabric sliding against wood as a figure settles more comfortably at a table. These sounds are neither constant nor loud, they arise now and then against the backdrop of silence, like brief ripples on still water, proof that the library is not empty, but quietly alive. You come to a tall wooden door bound with bronze straps. Its surface is marked by time, fine lines and shallow indentations where hands have pushed it open, where rings or nails have occasionally brushed against it. The bronze has dulled into deep, muted tones except where recent touch has polished small brighter arcs. The door is ajar, open just enough for the golden light beyond to spill out into the colonnade in a narrow triangle that grows wider near the floor. You step through. As you cross the threshold, your senses register subtle transitions. The echo of your footsteps changes, becoming slightly fuller in the enclosed hall. The scent of oil and papyrus grows stronger, wrapping around the cool stone smell with a dry, familiar comfort. The air feels held, as though the walls have been keeping it for this inward-facing world, allowing it to age gently like wine in a sealed jar. The main reading hall opens before you like a vast, dust-colored sea of shelves and columns, its far edges fading into a softness of shadow. Rows of tall cases stand in ordered ranks, some open, some closed with latticed fronts. These shelves reach upward toward a high ceiling supported by beams that disappear into a dimness where lamplight and moonlight begin to thin. Between the shelves, long tables stretch, their smooth wooden surfaces polished by years of use. Bronze lampstands stand upon them at regular intervals, each supporting a lamp whose flame creates a small circular field of clarity amidst the surrounding gloom. The hall is immense, yet the effect is not overwhelming. Rather than a single, echoing space, it feels like a collection of many smaller, overlapping sanctuaries formed wherever light meets table, scroll, and reader. The lamps carve out gentle islands of focus along the tables. And around each island sits a person or a small cluster of people, faces turned downward, shoulders relaxed, their attention drawn inward to the world of ink and thought before them. Between these clusters lie stretches of softer shadow where no one sits, like calm channels between islands, giving the eye room to rest. Far above, narrow windows cut into the upper walls admit strips of pale moonlight that fall in vertical bands across the hall. These bands cross shelves, tables, and floor, creating alternating layers of cool silver and warm gold wherever they intersect with lamplight. Dust motes drift lazily in the beams, made visible only when they wander into the moonlit paths, where they gleam briefly before slipping away again. The layered light gives the room a sense of gentle, widening depth, one reality lit from within by fire, another washed from above by the distant, indifferent stars. You choose a place at a table where one of these moonlit bands reaches down, its pale light touching the wood alongside the warmer pool cast by your lamp. When you set your lamp down, its flame steadies, its circle of light anchoring itself on the polished surface. You can feel the texture of the table through your fingertips as you let your hands rest there, the faint ridges of the grain, the tiny grooves left by long use, the slight dip where many wrists have leaned, the barely visible scars where ink once spilled and dried. It is as if the table itself has learned how to hold the posture of study, smoothing itself to accommodate the weight of leaning arms and the brush of turning pages. The wood is cool, but not cold. It responds to the warmth of your skin almost imperceptibly, a small exchange of temperatures that registers only when you pay attention. Under your fingers, you can sense different histories, some areas worn to softness, others still carrying more of their original crispness. Small dark dots mark where drops of ink once fell, each dot a tiny, frozen moment of surprise or inattention now absorbed into the surface. As your hands settle, it is easy to imagine other hands resting here before yours, generations of readers, scribes, and visitors whose bodies have long since left this room while their words, thoughts, or careful copying have remained. A librarian approaches, his step so measured and light that you notice him more by the faint shift of air than by sound. He carries a small bundle wrapped in clean linen, the cloth folded with practiced neatness. His hair, dark once, is threaded with gray that shines faintly where it catches the lamplight and moonlight together. Lines trace his face, not as deep furrows of tension, but as soft marks written by years of concentration and patient attention to the needs of others. His eyes are clear, the gaze steady and unhurried. He places the linen bundle on the table before you and begins to unwrap it. The cloth falls away in layers, revealing a scroll of pale papyrus nestled within. The scroll is tightly rolled, its edges even. The ends are capped with small wooden knobs, rounded and smooth from many hands. The papyrus has a faint sheen where the fibers catch the light, an almost imperceptible pattern of woven lines running across it. The librarian sets it down carefully within the circle of your lamp's glow, aligning it so that when unrolled it will stretch comfortably before you. Then, with a small inclination of his head, he withdraws, moving silently toward another table, another reader, another waiting pair of hands. He leaves behind the faint smell of clean linen and the memory of a presence that was attentive but never intrusive. For a moment, the hall seems to hold his movement in its memory, the slight stirring of air where he passed, the tiny adjustment in the balance of light where his shadow briefly brushed a nearby surface, before all settles again into its former calm. You rest your fingertips lightly on the scroll. The papyrus feels cool and faintly textured under your skin, the fibers giving just enough resistance to let you feel their pattern. At the edges where the sheets are joined, the seams are carefully aligned, visible only as the faintest change in thickness and direction of the grain. Taking one of the wooden knobs in your hand, you begin to unroll the scroll slowly, guiding the papyrus across the table. The roll yields with a soft, sighing sound, a whisper of fiber sliding over fiber. As the scroll opens, lines of writing emerge into the lamplight. Rows of carefully formed Greek characters appear, marching across the surface with measured regularity. The ink is a deep, settled brown, neither fresh and bright nor faded and uncertain. Each letter holds its shape with quiet confidence, the strokes precise and even, the spacing between words consistent. The script suggests a practiced hand that has spent many hours at this task, someone who knew how to balance speed with clarity, devotion with craft. You bend closer, and the letters begin to resolve into words, then phrases. The treatise speaks of the ordering of the heavens, of circles and spheres, of stars that keep to steady paths and planets whose motions seem more complex but still, when seen over enough time, reveal patterns. The tone is not excited or strident. Instead, it feels like the patient voice of someone who has watched the sky for long nights, who has traced paths on wax and papyrus, who returns again and again to charts and numbers until what once seemed random begins to suggest a gentle order. The author's mind reaches toward the stars in much the same way your lamp's light reaches toward the surrounding darkness, slowly, steadily, not to banish the night, but to understand a small part of it more clearly. Sentence follows sentence, each building carefully on what came before, each one like an inhalation or an exhalation. As you read, your own breathing begins to fall into that rhythm. Inhale as you take in a line, exhale as you let its meaning settle. The hall's quiet, the soft glow of your lamp, the silver wash of moonlight at the table's edge, all of it combines to draw you deeper into this measured, contemplative dance between text and reader. A soft sound, barely more than a brush of cloth against stone, draws your attention from the scroll. You lift your gaze and let it move toward the source. To your left, at another table not far away, a scribe sits with a fresh sheet of papyrus stretched carefully in front of him. His posture is upright but relaxed, the line of his back unstrained, shoulders neither rigid nor slumped. The lamplight near him reveals the slight sheen of a clean, unwritten surface waiting to receive ink. In his hand, he holds a reed pen, its tip freshly cut to a fine point, darkened by the ink that clings to it. Beside his hand, within easy reach, rests a small jar of ink, its surface glinting like a dark pool whenever it catches the light. You watch as he moves the pen from the jar to the papyrus. He places the nib down with gentle precision, and the ink flows out in controlled strokes that form letters one by one. His writing is practiced and unhurried, each character given just enough time to take shape properly before he moves to the next. The sound of the pen's tip traveling over the papyrus is a barely audible whisper. Combined with the occasional soft clink of the pen touching the rim of the ink jar and the faint rustle of his sleeve when he shifts his arm, it forms a simple, repetitive music. He pauses now and then, the pen hovering above the surface while his eyes scan what he has just written. His expression is not strained. It holds the focused ease of someone who has spent much of their life in this posture, translating thought and text into marks, preserving what was spoken or composed long ago. You consider what it means, in this place, to be called a scribe. It is not merely to copy. It is to serve as a bridge between times, to carry words across the fragile span of years. Here, in the library, a scribe may also be a thinker, a teacher, a commentator. Some interpret texts, writing notes that explain and expand. Others compose new works, their pens moving not just in obedience to an older voice, but in response to it, adding to the great conversation. In this hall, scribes are guardians of memory and architects of understanding. Their work is neither hurried nor loud. It proceeds in the small, steady motions of pen over papyrus, in the quiet choices of phrasing and layout, line by line. The scribe beside you pauses for longer, eyes resting on the half-filled sheet as if listening to it. It is as though he hears not just the scratching of his pen, but the faint echo of the minds whose words he is preserving. Then, with a subtle inclination of his head, a motion that might be agreement, or simply readiness, he dips his pen again and continues. The sound of ink touching fiber resonates, soft and even, blending with the other gentle noises of the hall until they are no longer separate, but part of the same slow backdrop. Time passes gently, without any sharp markers. You read a while longer, then allow your gaze to lift. The tall columns that support the roof rise like trunks of pale stone, their surfaces catching small fragments of lamplight and moonlight, their capitals disappearing into shadow. Up near the ceiling, thin webs of dust glimmer faintly where they catch a passing beam. Dust motes drift in the air, their motion hardly visible unless they wander into a defined path of light, where they shine for a moment like tiny, slow-moving stars before sinking out of sight once more. The hall seems to breathe with its occupants. Every so often, someone shifts on a bench, the wood giving a muted creak. A throat is cleared softly. A scroll is gently rolled further open, the sound of fibrous layers sliding over each other echoing faintly. These small sounds are separated by stretches of complete stillness in which nothing seems to move at all. Yet within that stillness, minds are active, hands are working, thoughts are flowing. The building, with its stone and wood and papyrus, feels less like an inert structure and more like a body whose heartbeats are too slow and deep to hear directly, yet whose life is unmistakable. Eventually, your legs suggest motion. They have been quietly supporting you, bent at the same angle for some time, and now they ask for a change. You respond by sliding your hands away from the scroll, letting it lie where it is, the text exposed and unperturbed. The papyrus does not tug at your attention or accuse you of neglect. It simply waits with the quiet confidence of something that knows it will be there when you return. You stand, feeling the slight stiffness in your knees as they straighten, the subtle adjustments in muscles and tendons as your weight redistributes. You take up your lamp again, fingers resuming their familiar hold around the clay body, and step away from the table. The circle of your light moves with you, gliding over the floor, over the legs of benches, over the lower portions of shelves. You follow the central aisle, then turn to move between two long rows of cases filled with scrolls. Here, in the narrower spaces between shelves, the light from your lamp feels more concentrated. It strikes the ends of scrolls resting in neat horizontal rows, highlighting little details, the roughness of an exposed edge, a spot where the papyrus is slightly darker. The faint lettering on a small tag tied to a bundle with thin cord. Some scrolls bear small wooden labels, others are marked by ink on the outermost layer. The variety of these modest signs hints at different origins, different hands, different paths through which these texts arrived here. The smell of papyrus is stronger between the shelves, dry but not unpleasant, a scent like that of sun-warmed straw cooled again, layered with subtle hints of ink and dust. The air holds a faint hint of resin from the wooden racks that support the scrolls, and beneath that, the cool, persistent smell of stone. You move slowly, allowing your gaze to rest briefly on one shelf after another, not to read titles or search for anything in particular, but simply to let your mind absorb the presence of so many sleeping texts, each one holding a voice, a set of thoughts, a fragment of the vast inner landscape of humanity. You reach a side corridor that leads away from the main hall. It is narrower and more shadowed, the shelves here rising higher, their upper levels reachable only by ladders that now stand leaned against the wood, waiting until needed. Your lamp's glow pushes the darkness back only so far. Above your head, higher shelves vanish into shadow, their contents hinted at only by faint, pale bands where the ends of scrolls catch stray light from the hall behind you. As you walk, the beam of your lamp sweeps across small, unexpected details. On one shelf edge, a thin seal of wax clings to a bundle of scrolls, its color dulled with age, its impressed design worn but still present if one looked closely. On another, a narrow gap between two shelves lets a thin slice of light from another room cut through the darkness, a tiny, vertical glow that seems almost like a wandering spirit of the hall. In a shallow niche, someone has tucked a little charm, a bead, smooth and dark, perhaps once part of a necklace, a small feather, a fragment of polished shell from the nearby shore. These objects sit quietly, not catalogued or labeled, a private, human offering to the space, tokens of personal attachment left in a place devoted to impersonal knowledge. At the end of the corridor, the shelves fall away on one side, opening onto a smaller room. A single window, unshuttered, breaks the outer wall. You step inside, drawn by the cool draft that brushes your face and the sense of openness beyond. The air in this room feels different, more directly connected to the outside world. The scent of papyrus is still present, but it is mixed now with a fresher, salt-tinged breeze that carries the sea's distant breath. Approaching the window, you feel the temperature drop slightly. The stone here has cooled more thoroughly, touched by the night air for hours. When you rest your free hand on the window's inner ledge, the stone's coolness seeps steadily into your skin, grounding you. Outside, the harbor stretches below, not clearly visible in detail from this height and angle, but unmistakable in sound and smell. The muted knocking of wood on wood reaches you when a hull nudges its neighbor or a rope draws taut. Somewhere a watchman calls out, his voice traveling along the water in flattened echoes. The sea's steady murmur is louder here, the waves folding and unfolding in their slow work along the curve of the shore, though still softened by distance into a continuous, calming hush. The contrast is tender. Beyond the wall, the vast, shifting dark of the sea, indifferent and expansive, moves under the same stars that shine through the narrow window. Within the room, shelves of scrolls stand still and vertical, containing within them maps, measures, words that attempt to name and understand that outer immensity. You stand for a moment between these two worlds, your body safe inside the stone's embrace, your senses reaching outward through sound and scent to the living water below. On a shelf near the window, you notice scrolls that differ in size and proportion from those in the main hall. They are broader, their papyrus wound around thicker rods, some with colored lines peeking from their edges. Curious, you draw one out, feeling its weight shift steadily into your hand. You carry it to a low table by the window and, setting your lamp near its edge, begin to unroll it carefully. Instead of lines of text, you see lines of drawing. Ink traces the shapes of lands and seas, rivers and mountains. The known world spreads across the papyrus in a series of curves and angles, coastlines outlined in firm strokes, rivers indicated by sinuous lines that branch and converge, mountain ranges suggested by overlapping marks that form small, clustered ridges. Tiny symbols mark the locations of cities, dots, small circles, minuscule pictograms accompanied by neat labels. The Mediterranean dominates the scroll, its familiar shape rendered from above, like a creature curled between its surrounding shores. The sea is left mostly empty, a pale space between the darker lines of land, yet the slight undulations in the ink along its boundary suggest waves, in their own stylized way. The Nile runs down from the southern edge, a dark, confident line that widens and branches as it nears the delta, like a hand opening. Along its banks stand clusters of marks representing settlements, the fertile margin between water and desert captured in delicate strokes. You follow the line of the coast with your eyes, traveling in miniature along places you know only by name, if at all. Slowly, you trace your way back toward the corner of the map that corresponds to where you stand now. There, near the Mediterranean's southern shore, you find a small symbol marking Alexandria. It is tiny, just a point, a circle, or a small stylized sign, accompanied by its name written in letters no taller than the nail of your smallest finger. You hover your fingertip just above it, aware that with the slightest downward motion you could cover the entire city as it appears here. Yet within that symbol lies the harbor with its moored ships, the streets you walked uphill, the mouse ion, the colonnades, this very room with its window on the water. All that vastness, all those separate lives and thoughts, are condensed into a single mark of ink that occupies less space than the full stop at the end of a sentence. Instead of making the world feel small, this realization calms you. The map does not diminish the reality outside, it simply offers a way to hold it gently in mind. It shows that the world is large and varied, a web of coasts and rivers and cities, and at the same time testifies that all of it can be considered, understood, drawn into relation. The library, in which you stand, is one expression of that desire to gather and comprehend, to create a kind of inner mirror to the outer world. After some unhurried time contemplating the map, you carefully roll the scroll back together. The papyrus slips into a tight coil with a familiar rustle, the lines of the drawing disappearing inward as if retreating to rest. You return it to its place on the shelf, aligning it with its neighbors so that its edge forms part of the quiet pattern of scrolls. The room feels slightly different now, as though by opening and closing that particular world of ink, you have taken part in a small ritual that connects you more deeply to the building's hidden order. You leave the window and the cool draft behind, stepping back into the corridor. As you walk, you pass another open doorway. The air that escapes from it is tinged with a distinct, earthier fragrance, crushed herbs, ground charcoal, faint metallic notes of pigment, and the slightly sour sweetness of certain resins. Drawn by this, you pause at the threshold and look in. The room beyond is smaller than the main hall and filled less with shelves than with tables and tools. At its center stands a broad work table, and around it, on trays or directly on the surface, lie small containers, bowls, cups, and shallow dishes. Some hold powdered substances in varying shades of black, red, brown, and dull yellow. Others contain liquids that reflect the lamplight in small, trembling patches, surfaces briefly bright where the flame catches them. A single scholar sits at the table, leaning forward slightly over a mortar in which he grinds something with a pestle. The sound is a soft, repetitive scraping, a circular motion that sends faint vibrations through the stone. Felt more than heard. Every so often, he pauses to pinch a little of the powder between his fingers, testing its fineness, then adds a drop or two of liquid from a small vessel, watching how it darkens and clings. Beside him, a reed pen lies ready, and a scrap of papyrus bearing a series of test strokes shows where he has tried the ink's consistency, its flow, its color when dry. The room smells different from the rest of the library, more tactile, somehow, more linked to the physical work that will make invisible thoughts visible. The aroma of ground charcoal mingles with that of dried gall nuts, vinegar, and perhaps a bit of gum arabic used as a binder. These scents hint at the transformation taking place here. Raw materials become ink, and ink becomes the medium through which entire worlds of thought are carried from one mind to another. On a nearby section of the table lies a partially completed manuscript. Its main lines of text are already set down in a dark, steady script. The headings, however, stand out in a softer red, slightly thicker, marking beginnings and sections. In the margins, small notes appear, compact commentaries or indicators in a finer hand, adding clarifications or cross-references. The arrangement is careful without being rigid. Every element seems placed with an awareness of how a future reader's eye will travel, where it might pause, where it will need guidance. You watch the scholar for another moment. His movements are exact but unhurried. When he is satisfied with the latest mixture, he tests it again on the scrap of papyrus, drawing a few characters and waiting for them to dry. He leans back slightly, studying the result, and then nods to himself with the smallest of motions. From outside the workshop, your presence is nothing more than one more quiet point of awareness in a room already full of concentration and care. Leaving the ink room, you return down the corridor to the main hall. As you step back into the larger space, you notice that its atmosphere has shifted subtly. More lamps have been lit at additional tables, their small flames joining the constellation of light already shining. Yet the increase in light does not make the hall loud or bright. Instead, it deepens the sense of layered illumination, like stars gradually appearing rather than a single blaze being ignited. The sky outside the high windows has darkened further, the last traces of dusk gone, leaving only the full richness of night. The bands of moonlight on the floor have moved slightly, sliding along the rows of tables and shelves as the night progresses. They now fall at new angles, touching different surfaces, making new points of contact with the lamplight below. Where the two kinds of brightness meet, cool and distant from above, warm and near from below, the air seems to hold an especially gentle clarity. A librarian, attentive yet unobtrusive, catches your eye. With a minimal, graceful gesture, he invites you toward another section of shelves. You follow, your lamp in hand, until you reach an area where the scrolls are marked by small symbols indicating poetry and song. The skin of the papyrus edges here looks no different at a distance, yet something in the labeling and arrangement makes it clear that these texts hold a different kind of content, not measurements and arguments, but crafted phrases arranged for the ear and the inner voice. You select one scroll whose edge sits just above your eye level. Your fingers close around its end, and you ease it from its place among its neighbors. It comes away smoothly, with the soft friction of papyrus against papyrus. You return to your table, set your lamp down once more, and unroll the new scroll with care. Lines of verse greet you. The text is arranged in balanced lengths, the scribe's hand leaving consistent spaces that give the eye breathing room, the rhythm of the lines visible even before you sound them in your mind. Where the prose treatise earlier felt like a measured walk, this arrangement suggests a different gait, more like gentle steps taken in time with a melody that only the inner ear hears clearly. You begin to read. The verses speak of orchards and rivers, of hills at dawn and valleys at dusk. They evoke the feel of early morning air touching leaves still cold from night, the way sunlight seeps gradually into groves, the scent of earth warming underfoot. They describe gentle winds moving through reeds by the water's edge, small waves lapping at stones, the quiet presence of someone walking alone or with another, lost in thought. The images are simple, but each carries its own weight, chosen with care, arranged so that one follows another in a sequence that feels both natural and deliberate. These poems also speak of tenderness, of human affection that does not blaze but glows steadily, a companion's presence compared to shade on a hot day, or to a lamp burning through the darkest hours. They touch on separation, but in tones that are more wistful than anguished, absences felt as empty spaces where light once stood, not sharp wounds. As you read, your mind drifts gently between the images on the page and the sensations of the hall around you, lamplight on polished wood, the soft edges of shadow around seated forms, the faint scent of oil and old papyrus that seems to settle into your clothes, your hair, your skin. Your eyes occasionally blur the words, not from disinterest, but because the poem's images begin to blend with your own impressions so completely that you no longer need to focus on the letters to sustain the scenes they evoke. You see, in your mind, a river at dusk that looks suspiciously like the harbor outside the library, its water catching the last light in broken streaks, or an orchard whose ordered rows resemble, in some dreamlike way, the rows of shelves in this hall. The poem and the place echo each other in your awareness, gentle reflections passing between inner and outer worlds. After a time, you find yourself reading less and listening more. You let your gaze rest on the open scroll without following each line. The hall sounds slip back into primary focus, the soft turning of papyrus, the distant, faintly scratching note of a pen, the occasional, barely audible footstep. You notice how your own breathing has slowed even further, how your body fits more easily into the curve of the bench, how your shoulders naturally fall into a position of rest. Across from you, another visitor has leaned on their elbow, their head tilted slightly, eyes half closed. Their scroll lies unrolled in front of them, but their gaze no longer moves along it. Their lamp has burned down, its oil nearly spent. The flame, smaller now, trembles more readily, its circle of light contracted to a modest pool that no longer reaches the edges of their text. The wick is blackened at its tip, exhausted, tending toward smoke. A librarian moves silently down the row of tables, attending to the lamps. His presence is like that of a gardener walking among plants, checking each one. When he reaches the wavering flame, he pauses, his attention narrowing to this small, faltering light. He lifts the lamp with practiced care, tilting it slightly to gauge the remaining oil. Then he produces a small flask and, with a precise motion, pours just enough oil to replenish what is needed, no more. The liquid gleams briefly, then disappears into the clay vessel. Next, he turns his attention to the wick. From a pouch at his belt, he takes delicate scissors, their edges catching the lamp's faint glow. With steady fingers, he trims away the charred portion of the wick, removing the part that tends to smoke and falter. The flame flares a little as the fresh wick draws in the new oil, then settles into a steady, calm burn. The ring of light around the lamp widens gently, reclaiming the small area of the table that had fallen into shadow. You watch this quiet act of maintenance with a sense of satisfaction that feels deeper than the smallness of the gesture might suggest. It is a simple thing, a lamp fed, a wick renewed. Yet it carries an understanding of balance, the awareness of how much oil a lamp needs to burn well, how long a wick should be to give a clean, gentle light. It is care offered without haste, a kindness extended not just to the object, but to the person who rests beside it, whether they are still reading, already drifting into sleep, or somewhere in between. The librarian sets the lamp back down with a soft touch and moves on, continuing his rounds among the tables and their pools of light. The visitor across from you remains in their half-drowsy posture, perhaps unaware of the attention just given to them, but nonetheless benefiting from it. Their features look softer under the steadier light, their breathing slow and even. You rest your chin lightly on your hand, elbow on the table. The wood supports you without complaint, its smoothness familiar. Your body feels both anchored and light, as though you are sinking gently into the bench while at the same time floating in the shared quiet of the hall. Your breath flows in and out, each cycle drawing in the scents and sounds of this place and releasing whatever scattered tensions might still linger in your muscles. The stone floor beneath your feet retains a mild warmth from the day, now softened by hours of darkness. Through your sandals, you sense its stable presence, the steady, grounding weight of the building's foundations. Above, the high ceiling and the distant windows cradle the space in which all these small, human activities unfold. Around you, lamps burn with a calm persistence, scrolls lie open or rolled, and the sea beyond the walls continues its endless, gentle work. Within this layered stillness, something in you settles more deeply. The library no longer feels like a place you have entered temporarily, but like a world in which you are temporarily awake, moving through it in the same unhurried way that thoughts move through a resting mind. Across the courtyard, in another wing of the library, a more intimate chamber waits, its existence suggested earlier by distant recollection and now gently pulling at your awareness like a soft thread. After lingering at the table for a while longer, you let that thread guide you. Slowly, you straighten, lifting your head from your hand. You sit without moving for a heartbeat or two, feeling how your body responds to the adjustment, then you rise, the bench releasing you with a faint creak. Your lamp, still burning with a steady flame, sits where you last placed it. You wrap your fingers around its clay body once more, familiar now with its temperature, its weight, the slight roughness where the clay bears the imprint of its making. As you stand, the pool of light it casts shifts upward, expanding briefly across the table before contracting again around the area where you move. The scroll of poetry remains open, its lines exposed to the dimmer ambient light. You leave it there, knowing it will wait with the same patience as the astronomical treatise you set aside earlier. You walk away from the main aisle, following a side passage that leads off toward a quieter wing. The walls here are lined not with tall shelves but with niches set at various heights. Within them rest smaller collections, bundles of letters, fragments of older texts, slim rolls bound with colored cords. Each niche feels like a small, self-contained universe of correspondence and commentary, pieces of thought exchanged between individuals across distances of land and time. The labels are fewer and more understated here. These are not grand works, perhaps, but personal voices, the written traces of specific relationships, conversations captured in ink. Your lamp circle of light glides over these niches as you pass, catching now a fragment of script visible on an exposed edge, now the seal on a bundle, now a piece of wax that has chipped away and fallen to the ledge below. The air in this passage feels slightly different from the main hall, still cool and dry, but with a subtle intimacy, as if the texts here breathe a more private atmosphere. You can almost imagine the murmured tone of these letters, the smaller scale of their concerns, the delicate weight of the words they carry. The passage opens eventually into a circular reading room. Its shape contrasts gently with the rectangular lines of the halls you have passed through. Here, the walls curve around you in a continuous arc, making the space feel contained and embracing. The ceiling above is not high and hidden but a shallow dome, its smooth surface catching the lamplight from below in soft gradations. Around the circular wall, lamps are set in simple brackets at regular intervals. Their light forms an unbroken ring, each flame casting a small halo that overlaps with its neighbors, so that no part of the wall is in deep shadow. Between the lamps, sections of the wall are left plain, while others host shallow shelves or niches holding scrolls. The floor, paved in stone like the rest of the library, seems to echo the room's circularity in its subtle patterns of wear, the paths of many feet tracing faint arcs along its surface. At the very center of the dome above, an opening reveals a circle of sky. The oculus is not large, yet in this enclosed room it feels immense. Through it, the night looks darker than it did through the high windows of the main hall, perhaps because the edges of the opening are closer, framing the stars more tightly. A handful of bright points glitter against the deep, black-blue backdrop, their light distant and clear. No glass or covering obstructs this view, only the air stands between the ceiling's rim and the open sky. You sit on a low bench beneath this circle, your lamp at your side. As you settle, the bench yields slightly under your weight, its stone surface worn by many previous occupants into a gentle, accommodating curve. You place the lamp on the floor near your feet, where its glow spreads outward in a mild halo that just reaches your knees and the lower parts of the wall, leaving the upper portion of the room, and the sky above, stained mainly with darkness and faint starlight. The contrast is soothing. The ring of lamps along the walls keeps the chamber from feeling vast or empty. Their combined light is enough for reading, enough to reveal the gentle curvature of the stone, the faint hairline cracks in the plaster, the shadows where the walls meet the floor. Above, the oculus cuts into that sheltered brightness, opening it to the infinite, indifferent clarity of the stars. Between the two, between the reachable warmth of oil-lit fire and the unreachable cold of distant suns, you sit, your body small and quietly aware of both. A scroll lies beside you, one you have brought from the main hall, a text that describes constellations and their patterns. The papyrus feels slightly thicker than some of the others you have handled, as though it has been reinforced at some point, tended so it might survive longer. You unroll a portion of it across your lap. The inked lines and letters set out star groups, describing where they rise, how they move, what shapes observers have imagined in them. As you read the descriptions of constellations, your eyes occasionally lift to the patch of sky framed by the oculus. Only a small fraction of the heavens is visible, yet it is enough for you to feel the continuity the text evokes. The same stars that ancient observers watched with careful attention are the ones flickering faintly above you now. The words on the scroll reach backward, touching those long-ago nights. Your gaze reaches upward, touching the current night. Somewhere between the 2 points lies your own quiet presence. You imagine other readers who might have sat here before you, lamp at their side, scroll open on their knees, eyes traveling between inked lines and actual stars. Their names may never have been recorded. Their individual thoughts never preserved, yet their posture, their small movements, their breathing in a room like this form part of the invisible history of the library. For a moment, you feel yourself as one among that number, a temporary link in a chain of watchers and readers, sharing this same position under this same circle of sky. Time in this chamber feels slightly different from the main hall. There are fewer movements, fewer sounds. A distant, softened murmur from the larger spaces reaches you now and then, but it is filtered by stone and distance, more suggestion than presence. The dominant sound becomes your own breathing, along with the faint, nearly inaudible hiss of oil being consumed in the nearby lamps. Very occasionally, a night breeze finds its way down through the oculus, a thin stream of cooler air that brushes your face or the back of your neck and makes the nearest flames bow briefly before they find their upright shape again. After some unhurried time spent like this, reading, looking up, letting your thoughts drift between heaven and ink, you gently roll the scroll closed and set it aside. You remain sitting, gazing up through the opening, until your neck begins to feel the slight ache of being tilted back too long. That, too, is a kind of reminder that you exist not only as awareness but also as a body with its own simple needs and limits. You rise from the bench and pick up your lamp, feeling again how familiar its weight has become, how naturally your fingers find their accustomed grip. Leaving the circular room, you step back into the passage of niches and letters, and then from there into the wider corridors of the library. The building's pathways form a gentle maze, yet by now you are beginning to know them not as a puzzle, but as a series of remembered gestures. Your feet recall which turn leads toward the wing of histories, where the scrolls of chronicles and rulers and battles rest. They remember which way leads to the hall of biographies and lives, and which stairway climbs up to the galleries overlooking the main hall. The walls, in their turn, bear subtle marks of this familiarity in the patterns of wear along their lower surfaces, in the sheen on railings where hands have slid along. You choose the stair tonight. It leads upward in an easy incline, its steps worn slightly concave from countless ascents and descents. As you climb, you trail your free hand along the stone wall. The surface is cool, its texture smooth but not polished, interrupted here and there by minor imperfections, a chip, a faint groove, a spot where the stone's grain shows through more clearly. The sensation of stone under skin is solid and steady, offering a sense of support even though you do not rely on it for balance. Your lamp casts a moving oval of light along the steps. Each rise appears first at its edge, then as a full surface, then drops into shadow behind you as you ascend further. The modest rhythm of step after step, light lifting and falling along the stairs, acquires its own slow music. Your breath adapts easily to the climb, deepening slightly but never straining, the air cool and clean in your throat. At the top, the stair lets you out onto an upper gallery that runs along the walls above the main hall. A low balustrade separates the walkway from the open space below. When you step up to it and look down, the hall you left earlier is transformed by perspective. From above, the tables and shelves lay out in a pattern that seems more overtly deliberate, like lines of script written on a page. The tables stretch in parallel, the shelves stand in perpendicular order, and the people gathered at them appear small, each within their own circle of light. The lamps look like a myriad of tiny suns, their golden halos overlapping in some places and standing alone in others. The effect is reminiscent of the night sky, but inverted. A field of darkness holds scattered points of light, yet here the darkness belongs to the floor and the distant corners, while the stars are close, burning at the level of human hands and eyes. The sound from below is softened by distance. You hear it as a low, continuous murmur. Without distinct words or separate noises, a gentle hum that tells you the hall is still alive with quiet activity. Occasionally, a small sound becomes clear for a heartbeat, a scroll rolling, a chair scraping slightly, but then it returns to the overall blend. The gallery itself feels more still, as if it were a vantage point designed for observation rather than participation. Along the gallery, smaller alcoves open off the walkway. Each contains a single table with a lamp, and perhaps a few shelves or a chest. These are places for more solitary study, tucked away from the larger shared space. Their entrances are broad enough to avoid any sense of confinement, yet their partial enclosure, the way they peel off from the main path, lends them a sense of privacy. You choose one of these alcoves almost by intuition, gravitating toward a spot where the lamplight reaches just far enough to reveal the walls and the table but leaves the corners in gentle shadow. Stepping inside, you set your lamp on the table. Its light joins that of the lamp already there, the two flames echoing each other, giving the small room a double warmth. A scroll rests on the table, as if expecting you. Its papyrus shows its age more openly than the others you have handled tonight. The fibers stand out more clearly, the color slightly darker, with a faint irregularity along the edges. When you unroll it, the ink appears in strokes that vary more from character to character. Some letters are darker, others lighter. Some lines lean slightly, as if they were written with more haste or emotion. As you read, you realize this is not a polished, singular work but a collection of notes and commentaries. The main text appears in segments, a quoted line here, a short passage there, followed by glosses, observations, and questions. Some parts clarify words and phrases, explaining their meanings or alternative readings. Others propose different interpretations, sometimes offering examples from elsewhere. Still others simply mark a passage with a question, an uncertainty, a doubt the writer could not resolve. This text does not speak with one, authoritative voice. It murmurs with many tones, the voice of the original author being commented on, the voice of the commentator explaining and arguing, perhaps even the faint traces of another hand adding its own marginal note in a different ink. You can almost see the commentator at work, sitting much as you are now, lamp at his side, the original scroll nearby, his own papyrus spread out before him as he tries to capture his responses and insights before they fade. The uneven strokes of ink reflect more than the passage of time. They show changes in the writer's energy, in his attention, in how fully his hand obeyed the flow of his thoughts. Some comments are densely written, letters cramped together as if trying to keep up with an urgency of insight. Others are spaced more widely, as though the mind had room to breathe and reflect. In a few places, a line is crossed out, replaced by another written above or beside it, an older idea discarded in favor of something clearer or better. You feel a quiet kinship with this unseen writer. Even though centuries may stand between you, the sensation of leaning over a text, wrestling gently with its meaning, remains the same. The commentary embodies not just understanding but the process of reaching for understanding, with missteps, corrections, and moments of doubt included. It is not knowledge already settled, but knowledge in motion, preserved at an intermediate stage rather than at a final destination. Your eyes grow a little heavier as you read. The lines of script begin to blur at the edges, not because of the text's difficulty, but because your body is reminding you of the hour and of the day you carried here. The light of the lamps feels a fraction softer, the edges of shadows less defined. You read one more comment, then another, and then you simply let your gaze rest on the open scroll without actually taking in the words. You place your hands loosely in your lap and sit in stillness for a while. The sounds from the main hall below reach you as a gentle, indistinct murmur. The air in the alcove is cool but comfortable, held in the custody of thick walls that buffer the fluctuations outside. You become aware once more of your own breathing, in, slow and cool through your nose, out, warm and soft, leaving your lips or nostrils with barely any sound. With each exhale, your connection to the outer world's pressures loosens a little further. The demands and noise of the streets, the bright glare of the sun on stone, the practical concerns that occupy the day, they all feel far away now, as though belonging to a different lifetime. Here, in this upper alcove of the great library, surrounded by ink, papyrus, and carefully tended lamps, you inhabit a narrower, calmer slice of existence in which only a few things matter: the feel of the bench beneath you, the scroll in front of you, the steady presence of your own body at rest. Eventually, guided by a quiet impulse, you roll the commentary scroll back up and set it carefully aside. The motion is slow, reverent, as though you are returning the writer's active, questioning mind to a resting state. You rise once more, feeling the minor stiffness in your knees and lower back respond as you straighten. Your lamp awaits by the edge of the table, and you reclaim it, the familiar warmth of its clay body reassuring in your palm. Leaving the alcove, you walk along the gallery, taking one last look down at the pattern of lamps below, now thinner as the night deepens and some readers depart or drift into sleep. Then you find the stairway and begin your descent. The steps welcome you back, their hollow centers evidence of how many times they have been traveled. The movement downward feels easier than the climb did, gravity now working with you, your body following the habitual, simple pattern of lowering one foot, then the other, lamplight sliding ahead of you along the steps. The main level greets you with a sense of familiarity that borders on intimacy. You return along the aisle, guided by memory as much as by sight, until you arrive once more at the first table where you sat. The astronomical scroll still lies there, half unrolled, its lines of text exposed like a page you placed a finger in and then left for a time. Your lamp, although lower than before, still burns with a quiet, unwavering flame, its oil not yet exhausted. You sit down again. The bench adjusts to your weight with the same small, almost imperceptible shift it made earlier. This time, you do not reach for the scroll's end to read more. Instead, you lay your fingers lightly on the exposed papyrus, tracing with your skin the faint ridges of the fibers. The characters etched in ink remain coherent and complete, though your tired eyes no longer focus on them. They appear now as a patterned field, an ordered sea of shapes whose precise meanings you choose, for this moment, not to chase. It is enough to know they are there, that the careful work of others has preserved them for you and for anyone else who might one day sit at this table. The text will not fade if you look away. Like the stars above, it does not require your constant attention to continue existing. That awareness allows you to relinquish the effort of reading without guilt, to let your shoulders and eyelids relax further. Across the hall, you notice a door to a small side courtyard standing open. The dark rectangle of the doorway cuts into the lamplit wall, and through it, a deeper night is visible, a night unsoftened by interior lamps, framed instead by the paler outline of stone and the faint shimmer of something reflective beyond. Drawn by curiosity and the promise of fresh air, you lift your lamp and walk toward it. Stepping through the doorway, you enter a courtyard smaller than the main one you saw earlier. Here, the walls rise close, forming a sheltered, almost cloistered space. The ground is paved in stone, but at its center lies a shallow pool, its surface smooth and dark. A few lamps are set around the pool at low height, their stands modest, their flame small. Their light does not compete with that of the stars above, it merely offers a warm counterpoint, illuminating the immediate area while leaving the sky and the upper walls steeped in true night. The water in the pool reflects the lamps and the stars together. Each small flame appears twice, once in the air, once in the water, its reflection trembling slightly whenever a faint breeze stirs the surface. The stars overhead, more distant, form a scattered pattern in the pool that moves with even subtler shifts. The combined effect is a double sky, one above, vast and unreachable, one below, contained and fragile, yet in some ways more intimate. The air here feels cooler and more alive, carrying the night's breath more directly. It brushes your face and hands, sliding through your clothing with a hint of chill but not discomfort. From beyond the courtyard walls, the sounds of the harbor reach you more clearly than they did in the interior halls. The murmur of distant voices rides up from the shore, broken and softened by distance. The occasional knock of wood rings out when a hull or oar taps against something solid. The wave's rhythm is more distinct now, the water's motion translating into a continuous, slow, repetitive sound that seems to rise and fall in your chest. In one corner of the courtyard grows a small tree, different from the fig in the main court but sharing its quiet, rooted presence. Its slender branches reach upward and outward, and its leaves, smaller and more numerous, whisper softly whenever the breeze passes through them. Their sound blends with the water's hush and the distant sea murmur, forming a delicate harmony that needs no attention to be appreciated. You find a stone bench along one wall and sit, placing your lamp at your feet. Its glow pools around your sandals, catching the pale curve of stone and the textured surface of the wall behind it. Above that circle of warm light, the wall rises into shadow, and beyond it, the sky opens wide and uncontained. The library, visible through the open doorway behind you, glows faintly, lamps within the hall casting a gentle radiance that spills just enough to suggest the presence of a larger space, a heart beating quietly behind this more secluded chamber. Out here, under the open sky, your thoughts slow even further. The courtyard offers fewer stimuli than the halls full of shelves and scrolls. There are no texts calling for attention, no lines waiting to be read. There is only water, stone, leaves, distant sound, and the soft orange point of your lamp at your feet. Your mind responds by loosening its hold on structured thinking, letting images and impressions rise and fall like the reflections in the pool. You find yourself thinking of the countless scrolls inside the library, histories and poems, treatises and letters, and of all the hands that wrote them. You imagine the scratch of pens across newly prepared papyrus, the careful cutting of reeds, the mixing of inks, the trimming of wicks, all the small rituals that support the act of setting thought into something enduring. You picture teachers leaning over texts with their students, tracing lines with fingers, murmuring interpretations. You see solitary readers like yourself, sitting in lamplight, bodies anchored by benches while minds roam across descriptions of places they will never visit, times they will never see. All of this effort, all of this attention, feels like a slow tide, a human tide, that rises and falls over centuries, washing knowledge forward, leaving new deposits on the shore of the present before receding again. Each text is a shell left behind, delicate but persistent, a trace of something living that once moved and breathed in a particular mind. The library gathers these shells, lays them out on its many shelves, not to display them as dead curiosities but to make them available to be held, examined, wondered at, over and over. The bench beneath you has stored its own warmth from the day's sun, now released in a faint, steady radiance that meets the coolness of the night air halfway. You lean back against the wall, allowing your shoulders to rest fully against its firm support. The stone presses against you in a way that feels reliable, unchanging. You tilt your head slightly, letting it rest there as well. Your eyelids sink halfway closed almost of their own accord, making the stars above you blur and multiply into soft clusters of light. The world narrows, in a comforting way, to a handful of sensations. The murmur of the sea. The soft, intermittent whisper of leaves. The faint, almost inaudible lap of water in the shallow pool when the breeze is just enough to disturb its surface. The delicate, dry fragrance that drifts from the hall behind you, papyrus, old wood, a residue of oil and wax. The gentle, compact warmth that rises from the lamp at your feet. Your body feels a little heavier now, but the heaviness is not unpleasant. It is the weight of muscles that have relaxed, bones that have surrendered themselves to support, a heartbeat that no longer hurries. You can sense, in a vague way, the line of your spine resting against the wall, the angle of your legs bent at the knees, your hands resting loosely on your thighs or folded in your lap. There is no need to adjust anything. Everything is enough as it is. After some unmeasured time, minutes or perhaps longer, you decide to return inside. The choice arises naturally, not from any sense of obligation, but from a quiet feeling that you are ready for a still deeper rest, in a softer, more enclosed space. You reach down for your lamp. Its clay body is warm to the touch, holding the heat of its own little flame. Taking it up, you rise from the bench, feeling the faint reluctance of your muscles to leave their comfortable arrangement, and then step back into the doorway. Crossing from cool night into the gentler lamplight of the hall feels like passing into a held breath. The main reading hall has quieted further since you were last there. Some lamps have been extinguished entirely, their stands empty or their bowls dark. Others burn with smaller flames, their wicks lowered so that they give only as much light as is needed. The number of readers has diminished as well. The tables that were once occupied in clusters are now attended here and there by solitary figures, some still reading, others simply sitting with hands folded, eyes unfocused. The air feels thicker with stillness, the sounds even more subdued. A chair scrapes once, carefully. A scroll is rolled up with extra gentleness. Somewhere, far off, a door opens and closes with a muted whisper. The hall seems to exhale slowly as the night deepens, its energies turning away from activity and toward repose. A kindly-faced librarian approaches you. His presence is familiar now, a type rather than a specific individual, the quiet, observant guardian of this place. He does not speak loudly, indeed, he scarcely needs to speak at all. A soft gesture of his hand, a slight inclination of his head, is enough to ask whether you would like a quieter place to rest. You answer with a small nod, feeling in your limbs that the answer is yes, even before your mind forms the word. He guides you along a corridor that branches off from the main hall, walking at a pace that matches your own. The path is short, leading to a smaller chamber adjoining the larger space. This room is lined with low couches and cushions, each arranged to invite reclining rather than sitting upright. The lamps here differ from those in the main hall. They are shaded, their light filtered through covers that soften and diffuse it so that no flame shines directly into the eye. The resulting illumination is gentler, more like the last light of evening than the full wakefulness of day. You choose a couch near a wall where a high, narrow window admits a thin line of moonlight. The moon's silver meets the warm glow of the shaded lamp nearby, creating a gradient of light across the wall, cool at the top, warmer below, the two tones blending in the middle. The couch's surface is covered in fabric, slightly coarse but not rough, stretched over padding that yields enough to accept your weight without swallowing it. The librarian places your lamp on a small stand beside the couch, trimming the wick one last time so that the flame is modest, its brightness reduced to a quiet, steady point. He sets a folded blanket at the foot of the couch, within easy reach. Then he steps back, his task done. With a small nod, again, more gesture than words, he leaves you to your rest and departs from the chamber, his footsteps soon fading into the wider silence. You lie back slowly, letting your body adjust in stages. First, you lower your shoulders until they meet the cushion, feeling the fabric and padding shape themselves to the contours of your back. Then you ease your lower spine down, allowing it to release the slight tension that has held you upright for hours. Your hips settle, your legs extend along the couch, your heels finding a natural rest. Your arms find their own positions, one perhaps across your torso, the other at your side, or both lying loosely along your body. As you settle, you notice small signals of relief. The muscles at the back of your neck stretch gently, then let go. The weight of your head, now cradled by the cushion, no longer demands any effort from the muscles that held it up. Your shoulders, freed from the obligation to support your arms and upper body, drop a fraction of an inch, the sensation like an exhale in your joints. Your legs, which have carried you from harbor to hill, from hall to courtyard, from bench to bench, now rest fully, their long bones aligned, the soles of your feet no longer flexed or bearing weight. Your hands fall open naturally, palms relaxed, fingers slightly curled without tension. You can feel the faint texture of the fabric beneath them, the presence of your own skin meeting something that neither presses nor pulls. The blanket at your feet is there if you need it, its weight and warmth a promise rather than an immediate necessity. You hover in that small, pleasant space between feeling the need to do something and realizing that you do not, in fact, need to do anything at all. The lamp beside you becomes, once again, the quiet center of your world. Its flame is smaller now, its movement slower, as if it, too, is preparing for rest. You watch it for a few moments, noticing the way it leans and straightens when a subtle draft touches it, the way it grows fractionally brighter when a new thread of oil finds its way to the tip of the wick, then settles back into its calm, teardrop shape. The metal of the stand beneath the lamp glows faintly, a ring of reflected light outlining the base. On the wall behind, a soft halo appears where the flame's glow diffuses outward, breaking into a gradient of brightness, from warm gold near the center to faint amber at the edges. Beyond the lamp's immediate orbit, the room's details become less distinct. The outlines of other couches appear as gentle shapes, their edges softened by shade. The occasional pale glimmer of another lamp shows where someone else rests or prepares to do so. The ceiling, darker than the walls, recedes, becoming a barely perceived canopy above. The thin strip of moonlight from the high window marks a single, pure vertical line along the wall, its edges sharp where it meets the darker stone. The sounds of the library now reach you as though through layers of cloth. You hear the faintest murmur of a closing door somewhere, the soft thud of a footstep, the almost inaudible rustle of fabric as someone lies down or shifts in their sleep. Between these minor disturbances, there stretches a long, deep quiet, broken only by a constant, soothing undertone, the far-off hush of the sea. That sound comes not as a distinct crash or roar, but as a continuous, low exhalation, like a giant creature sleeping just outside the city's walls, its breathing in harmony with the slow pulses of the night. Your own breathing begins to align with this broader rhythm. At first, you may be aware of it, noticing the way your chest rises and falls, the way your abdomen expands slightly with each inhalation and deflates with each exhalation. Inhale, cool air enters, carrying faint impressions of stone, oil, linen, and a subtle hint of the night outside. Exhale, warm air leaves, carrying with it invisible traces of whatever tension and thought remain. You do not force your breath to be any particular way, you simply observe as it gradually becomes slower, deeper, more even. Every so often, a thought drifts through your mind, perhaps a memory of the map with its tiny symbol for the city, or a fragment of a poem about rivers and reeds, or the image of the scholar grinding pigments at his table. These images appear like brief, gentle flashes, linger for a moment, then dissolve without demand. You do not need to hold on to them or push them away. They float up, they drift down, like dust motes in a beam of light, like reflections in the pool of the side courtyard, stirred and then smoothed by an almost imperceptible breeze. The more your body relaxes, the less distinct these thoughts become. Instead of sharp pictures, they soften into textures of feeling, the sense of being connected to a long line of thinkers and readers, the sense of being sheltered by stone and lamplight, the sense of the sea's presence beyond the walls, the sense that knowledge, written, collected, preserved, does not need your constant vigilance to endure. This understanding allows you to surrender more freely to the approaching drift of sleep, trusting that the library and its contents will continue to exist, calm and patient, while you rest. As the night deepens further, a librarian passes softly through the resting chamber. His steps are quieter here than in the main hall, his movements slower, as though he does not wish to disturb even the air. He pauses by each lamp in turn, assessing its level. When he reaches yours, he gently adjusts the wick, lowering it just enough that the flame diminishes to its faintest, stable whisper. The room responds to this change almost imperceptibly. Shadows grow thicker in the corners, the gradient between lamplight and moonlight on the wall shifting to favor the latter. The halo on the wall behind your lamp shrinks, leaving more of the stone in darkness. Yet enough light remains to keep the surroundings from disappearing entirely, to hold a small, comforting center in the near distance of your awareness. Your eyelids, already heavy, now close more consistently. If they open, it is only for a moment, and then they fall again, and each time they take a little more of the outer world with them when they shut. Inside the darkness behind your eyes, echoes of the library's spaces linger. You might see again the tall columns of the main hall, the banded light of the moon on the floor, the fig tree in the courtyard, the map's coiled lines of land and sea, the circle of sky in the domed room, the upper gallery's view of lamps resembling inverted stars. These inner images begin to shift and combine in ways that do not correspond exactly to the building's actual layout. Corridors connect to courtyards that never touched in waking life. Lamps hang in places they never hung. The sea appears at the end of a hallway as though a door opened directly onto it. Somewhere, a scribe writes under the oculus, stars above his head and an ink jar shining like a tiny pool of night on the table. The logic of waking architecture gives way to the softer, fluid logic of dreaming, yet the feelings attached to these spaces remain: calm, safety, continuity, gentleness. Your breath, the sea's distant hush, and the barely audible sigh of burning lamps merge into a single, slow rhythm. There is no urgency, no sense that you must hold on to any particular thought or image. The library holds everything for you: the texts, the lights, the spaces, the echoes of those who came before. It keeps them all in quiet, careful order, whether you are awake or asleep, whether you read or rest. The knowledge on its shelves does not fade when your consciousness loosens. It simply continues to exist in its own serene way, waiting for anyone, including you, to return to it. Warmth gathers along your back where it touches the couch, a broad, steady support cradling your spine. Along your front, where the blanket has been drawn lightly over you, perhaps at some point when you were already half asleep, the fabric envelopes your torso and legs in a gentle embrace, trapping a small pocket of heat that makes your body feel enclosed and secure. Your hands, now tucked beneath the blanket or resting loosely on top of it, hold nothing except, perhaps, the vague sensation of the night itself resting there, weightless and all-encompassing. Even the tiny muscles of your face relax. The lines around your eyes smooth out. The set of your jaw loosens. Your lips rest parted or closed without effort. Your expression becomes one of unguarded repose, reflecting the inner state of a mind that has stopped scanning, evaluating, planning, and has instead drifted into a state of simple being. Beside you, the lamp's flame continues its own slow diminishing, adhering to the careful adjustments made to it. It is still there, a small, golden point in an expanding sea of darkness, but it no longer asks for your attention. It stands watch in its quiet way, a miniature sun in a world that has chosen, for now, to dim itself. Somewhere deep within the library's maze of rooms, another door closes, the sound so muted that it barely touches the edge of your awareness before fading. The building seems to rest now almost as much as its occupants do. Stone walls, wooden shelves, papyrus scrolls, ink jars, lamps, benches, and couches, all of these silently endure, settling into a shared stillness in which nothing is demanded, nothing is urgent. You float in that stillness, suspended between waking and sleep, supported by it as a body floating on calm water is supported by the sea. The quiet presence of countless minds whose words rest on the shelves hums softly around you, not as noise, but as a barely detectable background vibration, like the deep echo of a temple or a cave. The great Library of Alexandria holds you as gently as it holds them, your small, human weariness cradled in the vast, enduring calm of its night. And as your breath slows just a little more, as its rhythm aligns completely with the hall's hush and the sea's distant murmur, whatever last thin threads of thought still tie you to full wakefulness loosen and drift away. You sink peacefully into sleep, still surrounded by the tender watchfulness of lamp and stone and stored words, while, beyond the high, open windows and above the domed rooms and courtyard pools, the lamps burn low and the distant sea whispers, patient and unending, along the curve of the shore.